Hello and welcome to Introverted Indies. My name is Lydia Baker. I'm co-host with the lovely Lisa McLaren. And today I'm here to talk to David Clegg, who is a sci-fi author. So, David, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, good morning, Lydia. As you said, my name is David Clegg. I'm a sci-fi author working on space opera slash military sci-fi, very much in the vein of the classics like Robert Heinlein, David Weber, that kind of stuff. And I am 43. I live in Northampton with my wife and a menagerie of pets. I work in a job I'm not allowed to talk about, which is much less exciting than it sounds, but I have got my Twitter followers convinced I work at MI5, so that's fun. What else to tell you? I've been writing since I was a teen and seriously writing for the last 10 years or so. It takes me a lot of time to get through a book, but I've been doing that. I've been published since 2021. And the next book is in process at the moment.
That's exciting. So, tell us a little bit about your first book, which I have read actually. So, yes.
You have. So the first book is the Aule Stratagem and split into two parts. Part one, Slave Ship, and
Mhm.
part two, Aurora. And that was done by the publisher because I turned in a manuscript that was about 130,000 words, and they suggested that it would be too expensive to do it as a single book for people to risk on a new author they'd never heard of. So we agreed to split it in half, about 2/3 through, and I had to produce another 20,000 or so words to fill out the second half. So the combined book is about 150,000 words now. It is a very classic space opera. So following a single ship, the CSS Aurora, on a mission to the Aule sector to help suppress piracy and smuggling and other wrongdoing going on in that region. There is, of course, more to it than that. There's more going on than meets the eye, but there's plenty of time for thrilling action and explosions and many, many nefarious pirates meeting their horrible end, as they
As-
rightly
as-
deserve.
yeah, they're not very nice. I remember reading it thinking, cool, these are not nice people. But they
It's
did
not like
get
the
them.
Lego pirates.
No. Excellent. So, and you said you have split it into two parts. Yeah, I understand. Like the cost of printing books, I feel has gone up recently, which is
Mm.
obviously a big thing. When you're covering that cost yourself, it's a lot. But I guess the publisher covers that for you.
Yeah, the idea was that the cover price would have been sort of $12.99, and
Hmm.
they didn't think that a lot of people would want to pay that amount for an unknown author. So
Yeah.
they split it into two and set the paperbacks at $8.99, which is a bit more reasonable.
Yeah. Yeah.
You might think, well, I want a paperback, I'll pay it. And the ebook, of course, is only $2.99, so
Hmm.
much cheaper for people to take a chance on an unknown author and see if they like them. Both halves are the same price, so it'd be cheaper than a coffee date at Starbucks or Costa
Yeah.
to buy it. Um, and that's what we counted on.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Costa and Starbucks are expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and yeah, I know that even now when I look at books to buy, even when it's a well-known author and the ebook is like £8, I think, oh, well, I'll just wait. I don't even want to spend £8 on an author that I
Yeah.
know. So yeah, pricing it low. I do the same. I price my books low so that people might
Yeah.
take a chance.
It makes sense because the costs are less to do an ebook.
Hmm.
There's no printing cost, there's no shipping cost. Once
Yeah.
you've paid the upfront cost to get the device, whether that's the Kindle or one of the alternatives, um, the books themselves should be much, much cheaper because you're just downloading a digital file.
Hmm.
I mean, your editing and typesetting and all that, those costs are still there, whether it's electronic or paper, but the physical book is what's adding all that cost.
Yeah.
So I don't see any reason why an ebook would be the same price as a paperback, other than just, well, this is a big named author, let's milk it,
Yeah. No, I
which I don't
agree.
want to be part of.
No, no. And so, what inspired your books? You mentioned a few sci-fi authors, and I know that when I read it,
Mm,
it's quite a lot of sort of technical stuff. So I'm going to ask you a bit about that later. But tell us a bit about what
yeah.
inspired you.
Well, I grew up on science fiction from being a tiny boy. As a little toddler, my first passion was dinosaurs, as for
Hmm.
many, many small boys, and big machines that make a lot of noise, as for many, many small boys. I can distinctly remember being given a pair of tiny workmen's overalls that had a patch on the chest saying demolitions, which, of course, what little lad doesn't want to smash
Oh yeah.
buildings down? And then very quickly from there, I was on to things like He-Man, the 80s cartoon. Um, I had a lot of the toys. That was my main thing at that time. And then Transformers, G.I. Joe, Lego space sets, all that kind of stuff. I can't remember a time that I wasn't interested in laser guns and spaceships and aliens, which again, I guess is pretty typical for young kids,
Yeah.
of, all the time going right back to the sort of 50s. But I was into that stuff very, very early in my very early childhood memories of things like Star Trek films,
Yeah.
Doctor Who. My uncle John, who's not with us anymore, was a massive Doctor Who fanatic, absolutely crazed for it. So we always had the tapes to watch. We just went, oh, Uncle John, lend us this one, lend us that one, and it turned up the next week. And so we watched that. I remember rushing to the telly to watch the last season when it went out in the early 80s.
Yeah.
Only hazy memories of that happening, but we were doing that. And getting a bit bigger, I was reading the Star Wars novel line as they came out. We watched Babylon 5 when that came out in the early 90s. We watched Space Precinct. I don't know if you've even ever heard of that one. That was Jerry Anderson, the Thunderbirds guy. He was
Okay.
behind that, and it was NYPD in space,
Hmm.
basically.
Oh, okay.
It was absolutely goofy nonsense, but it was great for a young one.
Yeah.
So we watched stuff like that, and Star Trek as it was going out. So the Next Generation was new when I was
Mhm.
little. So we watched that. We watched Voyager, Deep Space Nine, all of that. When the Star Wars prequels came out, we went to the cinema to see them. The less said about that, the better. But all of my formative time, I was on sci-fi
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
fantasy, but a lot of sci-fi. So when it came time to look at writing seriously, I had a bunch of ideas that I'd been working on for years, and I had to pick: am I going to write one of my fantasy ideas? Am I going to write one of my sci-fi ideas? And I went with the sci-fi idea, which turned out to be that. Although originally the main characters were going to be from the Terran Empire, and it was going to be the other way. The Confederacy were going to be the bad guys.
Okay.
So then I flipped that, because of various events that were going on in the world, and suggestions that I had from people that I knew that were also mad for sci-fi. And so it evolved into the book that you've read and that you've seen. What else to tell you? The other thing, my earliest writing efforts, more than just being a kid scribbling on a piece of paper, was Games Workshop Warhammer fanfic,
Mhm.
which then morphed from this will be fun to post on a forum to I might see if Black Library wants to publish this,
Yeah.
which then fell off in the end. They did some things that meant it wouldn't have been viable. So that idea disappeared. I've still got those files somewhere on an old PC, I think. They were actually quite good, but because it's copyrighted, you can't do much with it other than give it away for free.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot of the writing craft from doing that and getting commentary and feedback from other people in that group, who many of whom were also writers. So I refined a lot of what I was doing to then get to this, and you'll see little hints from 40k lore in there. little nods to how things work in that universe. And you will probably spot little nods to Star Trek and Babylon 5 and Battlestar Galactica and all the other things that I've consumed over the decades. Everything comes in as an influence. Although my biggest influences stylistically are Bernard Cornwell and David Webber. So Cornwell, you'd be aware, is a big historical fiction writer.
Yeah, I've read one
The
or two.
thing, I think everybody has.
Yes.
The thing I took from him and his work is how he writes fighting scenes, combat. It's very detailed, very focused on the individual character and what they're doing, what they can see, what they can hear, what they feel. So I've taken that as a stylistic influence. I'm not writing about the Napoleonic Wars. I'm not writing about Baker rifles and French columns. But stylistically, it's quite similar to what he does. And then David Webber is the author of the Honorverse space opera, which is quite different to what I've done, but there's a lot of influence from him in the way he structures, especially space battles, how he talks about what's happening and the physics of the weapons and technologies, but also the universe that I've made. A lot of it is inspired by him. So not just him, but a lot of other sci-fi settings as well, where there aren't any aliens. Everything's just different human nations. A lot of that is influenced heavily by David Webber, and then the conflict between these framed as ideological as well as political and motivated by money, gain, power, the usual suspects, but then focusing on individual characters, how they navigate that and how they try to influence that. So readers of David Webber will see a lot of similarities. I consider that an imitation as a form of flattery. He's one of my favourite authors for sure, although I've tried to do less of the astrophysics that are quite heavy in his book. If you read his stuff and you don't understand a lot of in-depth physics, you're going to sort of read it and go, yeah, okay, whatever, and move on, because you won't know what he's talking about. What is a light minute? What is acceleration rates measured in fractions of the speed of light? What does it mean? How do I understand it? What are these distances he's talking about? In mine, I've tried to compress a lot of that to get to the action and get readers invested in the people involved and seeing holes blown inside the ship and their crewmates flying out into space, rather than pondering the vast distance they've got to travel just to spot an enemy ship, because it is enormous. You know, Earth to Mars is something like 5 light minutes. That's an immense distance. You can't even comprehend it. You know, it's not like, oh, go on a plane to America.
No.
It'll take you 6 hours or 8 hours or something. It takes light 5 minutes to cross that distance.
And I suppose if you don't understand what that means, that doesn't mean a lot, does it? So
it's just irrelevant, what's going on. You know, when you think the distance to the sun is something like 10 light minutes, I think. Mm-hmm. You know, if the sun went out now, we wouldn't know until 10 minutes later.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. But when you look up at a star in the night sky, that light that's hitting your eye has been travelling for hundreds of years, potentially thousands of years. Some of the most distant stars we've spotted are billions of light years away. So we're actually looking at light that's travelled over 1 billion years before humanity existed. It's mind-boggling. We can't comprehend it.
No.
You start getting into the realms of cosmic horror and H.P. Lovecraft and things when you start thinking about concepts like that. So I've tried to steer away from a lot of that stuff. I mean, one of the big comments I did get is everything happens really fast. And that's because I've skipped that time.
Yeah.
You know, you arrive at the edge of a star system and travel to a planet orbiting the sun. I mean, if it was this solar system, it would take you, at the speeds we can achieve today, it would take you hundreds of years to cover that distance. Who wants to read about that?
Yeah, weighs it down a bit, doesn't it?
It's not going to work. So that all gets compressed and things happen quickly. So that readers aren't going, okay, so they've spotted an enemy ship and it's 30 light minutes away, so they're going to take a week to get to it.
Yeah.
Let's skip ahead.
Yeah, you don't want people
It's
to skim read, do you? That's the thing. You want to keep them
no,
engaged.
no,
Yeah.
that's the thing. Yeah, so I've tried to avoid a lot of that really heavy science, but as you mentioned, some of it does creep in because
Yeah.
it's inevitable with spacecraft, space travel, unless you're writing Doctor Who and you just quite literally hand wave it away in a sort of manic grinning way, of course, with
Yes.
Doctor Who.
Yeah. But also that's a part of you, isn't it? You enjoy those sorts of things. And I think we all write a bit of ourselves into our
Yeah,
stories. Something you
yes,
enjoy. So,
absolutely. I'm interested in those topics, and one of the things I did as part of my research was relentlessly questioned a friend of mine who is a PhD astrophysicist at a university in Greece. I want to say Athens, but he might have moved since then, as academics do. And I did question him on a lot of subjects that I then picked and chose what I was going to use.
yeah.
All the errors of physics are entirely mine. He gave me absolutely correct information. I just went, yeah, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So that's all my fault. He is credited actually in the acknowledgements, if I can find that.
And you probably find most people wouldn't notice that you'd made an error. So you're probably
Well,
safe.
there is an element of that, yes. That is true. So it's Dr. Stavros Dimitrikoudis is my astrophysics contact. I've probably butchered his name, so when he watches this, I'll get a message telling me off. But it is quite literally all Greek to me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what can I do?
Yeah. No, I think you've done a good job of it. I admit, for hands up, I don't understand a lot of it. But when I read it, it felt like it was genuine. It felt sort of knowledgeable. So I think you've done a good job.
Well, that's the other trick, isn't it? Is acting like you know what you're talking about, even if you don't.
Yeah.
And if you do it with enough confidence, people will believe you and accept it.
Indeed. Indeed. So I was going to ask as well, forgive my ignorance. So obviously we have sci-fi and we have sort of the genres within sci-fi. What's the difference between space opera and sort of your normal sort of sci-fi story?
Well, science fiction is a very broad category, as you say. The original genre was a lot more grounded than what we see today. The point of science fiction, the earliest books, was to ask what would happen if we had X technology? What if we could do this? How would the world change? So if you look at something like H.G. Wells' very early sci-fi, stories like The Invisible Man. So this one scientist works out how to become invisible. So what now happens? How does he use it? How does the world change? And the story plays out according to that character and his behaviour, his choices, the consequences of what he has done. You look at the War of the Worlds, it's a slightly different idea. That was based on a 19th century genre which was known as invasion fiction, and they tended to be written about the European colonial powers invading other parts of the world and taking over, which of course was prevalent at the time. And H.G. Wells flipped it on his head and said, well, what if somebody else came and did it to us? And then he imagined who could do that. Well, aliens from Mars with fantastical technology, heat rays and tripod fighting machines and things like that. And so he flipped that genre on its head, but it still fits into that category of science fiction. What if this happened? How would the world change? And another of his seminal works, The War in the Air, they develop reliable flying technology and then give it to the military. Now what happens? And this is how it plays out. Of course, it turned out not to be as prescient as it could have been, with giant airships bombing New York into literal rubble, but that sort of thing did happen a bit later on.
Yeah.
So that was sort of the point of science fiction, and then over the years it's morphed into other sort of subgenres. So space opera is categorized as being character driven and indeed very melodramatic at times. So it's like a soap opera in space with giant warships and lasers and stuff. How do those people behave and navigate in that world? So I've taken inspiration from the classics that I've mentioned and my own understanding of military doctrines, codes of conduct, behaviour, strategy, and so on, to work out how would this happen and to try to be semi-realistic about it. It's not that realistic to have spaceships with giant cannons shooting at each other, but it's more realistic than shields and warp drive and phasers. So I've tried to get to that with things that could work in my understanding of real physics. So a guided missile fired at another ship thousands of kilometers away is something that could happen. And if you stick a nuclear warhead on it, it'll blow that other ship into tiny little pieces, or indeed vaporize most of it. And that is viable with modern physics. You know, something like Star Trek's photon torpedoes that are based on antimatter. It's quite fanciful. It's theoretically possible, but we just couldn't get anywhere near that at any time in the near future. There's various other categories of science fiction as well, but that's where I've gone, because that's the sort of stories that I like, the things that I enjoy. Spaceships blowing each other up, it still gratifies the little toddler that wants to see spectacles on the screen and go ooh and ah when the lasers blow something up. We never really progressed past that stage, unfortunately. For all of our pretensions and trappings, we are all still just little boys blowing things up and making pew pew sounds. So that's where I've gone with that. But one of the things that I find interesting about the genre and discussions of what is science fiction, one of the authors that I've been compared to, and I take as an enormous compliment, was Michael Crichton, who of course famously wrote things like Jurassic Park, Timeline, The Andromeda Strain, and so on. And I've heard a lot of people say his stuff isn't science fiction, and they call it a techno thriller.
Okay.
But if you look back at the early sci-fi like H.G. Wells, it fits exactly into that category.
Yeah.
What if we could clone dinosaurs? That's a classic
big
sci-fi
one.
story. How does the world change? How do people use this? And as we see, they build a theme park to try to make money out of it, and then people get eaten, and it's very horrible.
Yes.
Fairly predictable as well. But I think that's also quite realistic in the way that people are portrayed. You know, who has control of technologies like that in the real world? Billionaires, business people.
Yeah, people with the money.
Know, exactly. So John Hammond is portrayed in the book as an eccentric billionaire, and he wants to build this thing and make money from it. I think that's exactly what would happen.
Yeah.
Unless there were regulations or government control to stop that. Then, of course, you've got to ask, well, what would the government do with technology like that? And that's a whole different category. But that's my understanding of what science fiction is, and why it's important, and why people flock to it in the numbers they do. Because you can, as a sci-fi writer, you can hold a mirror up to the world and you can exaggerate an issue almost to the point of absurdity to highlight the way you see it and how you see it playing out.
Yeah.
So a lot of science fiction in the last few decades is dystopian, and a lot of people are pointing at that sort of outcomes. So, well, you know, if we don't change, we could end up looking something like this. And of course, it's very fanciful and wild in a lot of ways. But the bedrock idea is completely accurate. You know, corporations running amok and taking over governments. Technology's running out of control. Artificial intelligence taking over and massacring everybody. All that kind of stuff it's all there as a warning.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, of course, haven't heeded those warnings
No.
with what's going on in the current climate. I don't need to tell you about dystopian fiction, of course.
Yes, that is something I quite enjoy writing. But
Yes, I've got to catch up. I've only read the first one. I think you're
ah,
on 3 or 4 now.
yeah, so the Ava series is done now. That all three of those books are out, and there's another dystopian book which is a different story, which is
Right.
currently out now. But
I'm lagging behind. I've only read one.
there's no
Shocking conduct.
So you said you're working on some other stories as well. I know that when we've been speaking, you mentioned some fantasy stories as well that you were contemplating.
Yeah, indeed. I've got a couple of sort of world building exercises going on that I've been thinking about for many, many years. One is quite a classic medieval knights and castles and stuff setting, very heavily inspired by Game of Thrones. George Martin's rather gritty stuff. So that would be quite grounded, quite realistic. There'd be no wizards running around, but then there would be sort of fantastical things coming in later, and that would be enjoyable for me because one of my great passions is history, and
Yeah.
medieval history is one of my main areas that I'm interested in. The thing I notice with a lot of medieval fantasy is the author doesn't know much about the Middle Ages at all, and it's a very modern, very Hollywood portrayal of what they think the Middle Ages would be like. And of course, it's fantasy, you can change anything that you want. But what a lot of people don't realise is you're using shorthand. So if you say this person is a knight and don't explain what a knight is, by default, it's a medieval European knight. And people that understand knighthood will have certain expectations, and if then that doesn't play out, they'll be scratching their heads going, well, knights don't do that. What are you talking about? So medieval fantasy is one of those I think you need to do a lot of research and understand very deeply, which is why the Game of Thrones books stood out to me, because the people in those books, their attitudes and behaviour is quite medieval, is quite accurate for that period and how people would have behaved. And if you read anything about things like the Wars of the Roses, the nobles in Game of Thrones act very much like those people. And the callous way they treat the lower classes, especially disregard for other people. It was very classic late medieval thinking. Whereas a lot of fantasy that I've read, they have very modern attitudes about things, but they're in a world where those attitudes wouldn't have arisen because the circumstances don't create them. You know, the modern world is the way it is because of all the events that have happened in history leading up to massive social changes, like the end of the Middle Ages, the rise of industry, the rise of the merchant class, the middle class, the death of feudalism because of those things. If that hadn't happened, we would still have a feudal society today because there's no reason for it to change.
Yeah.
But people don't realise that. And of course, with a fantasy setting, you can do whatever you want to it.
Yeah.
But if it isn't believable, it takes the reader out of the story and then you failed as an author. Because if I'm reading a book and going, well, this is nonsense, why would people behave like this?
Yeah.
This is a pre-industrial society. What's going on? Unless there's a reason for it. You know, magic is a big one. If you've got magic, how does the world change? Depends, of course, on how the magic works. But magic is similar to technology and sci-fi. You can go to other planets because you've got this technology, which otherwise we can't do it. The nearest star is 4.2 light years away. At sublight speed, it will take centuries to get there. It just isn't viable. So if you're talking about magic, well, can you teleport to another continent? Okay, now I don't need to develop tall ships, clippers and fancy technology like that. I don't
Yeah.
need steam engines to make it viable. I can just go there with magic. So the world changes.
Yeah.
It's a problem, but it's not universal. Lots of fantasy writers do these things brilliantly, but a lot of them I do see, they show a lack of knowledge of the time period that they're basing their fantasy on. The other main idea that I've got is an ancient sort of world, so sort of sword and sandals kind of idea, without feudal lords and castles and knights.
Yeah.
But it would end up sort of similar, because you've still got stratified societies, you've still got a class structure, you've still got rulers, kings, emperors, and you've still got magic. So how that ends up looking, I haven't really got as far with that one. But it's an interesting exercise to think of how do societies develop, how do technologies influence that, how does magic influence that, how does the presence of sentient creatures that are not human influence that, how do we react to other things that can walk and talk that aren't us, and not even touching on things like the uncanny valley and early hominids and that kind of thing, because that ends up being more horror than fantasy if you look at the prehistory. Some of the hominid species literally preyed on Homo sapiens children, so it's pretty terrifying. I do wonder if that's where we get the folk stories of witches eating children.
Yeah, potentially.
Baba Yaga and the gingerbread house and all those sort of things. But the idea that if you were out in the wild and you saw something that looked human, but you weren't sure if it was, that was a massive danger. So you needed to deal with it. That may be the source of some of these ideas that have carried on through the centuries. But slightly off the point of fantasy ideas, I have got piles of ideas for things that I might do. I'm toying with another fantasy setting that I describe as D&D for grown-ups.
Yeah, okay.
So take all the goofy silliness out, and it becomes quite sort of gritty and violent. But we'll see if I get anywhere with that.
Yeah. It sounds like you obviously spend a lot of time planning your worlds and researching, and which kind of leads me on to sort of your writing process. Are you, obviously, it sounds like you do like to plan. I know some authors are kind of on the seat of their pants sort of thing. I think I fall personally in the middle. At the moment, I'm writing crime, which I find I have to plan a lot more. And since planning more, I've then planned more for other things that I want to work on.
Yeah.
What about you?
I'm definitely at the far end of the planner-plotter spectrum. I find if you haven't planned something, you will come unstuck. If not quite quickly, but you will do it quite spectacularly. What's known as writing yourself into a corner.
Yeah.
And, it's fine if that works for you. Famously, people like Stephen King do it that way. Obviously, he's done spectacularly. So, it works for some people, it doesn't work for me. One of the big advantages I find with planning is that you get the writer's block out of the way. So you sit down to plan, you think of what your story's going to be, you lay out line by line or however detailed you go. And if you get stuck, I can't think where it would go from here, and you pack it away and go away, and when you come back, you've come up with something. When you then sit down to actually write that story, you've got a guide. So if you've forgotten what's supposed to happen or how it's supposed to happen, you look at that guide and then you're out of that problem again.
Yeah.
And I have been doing that recently when I've sat to work on the next book in the series. I've got a vague idea in my head of what's supposed to happen, and then I've gone, well, hang on, what was actually supposed to happen? And then I go back to the plan and go, oh, yeah. it's supposed to go like that. But also, you do find, or I find in the plan, it's not detailed. So I was like, well, this is supposed to happen, that's supposed to then happen following it. How? So then there's still that work to do.
Yeah.
The other great thing with planning, and one of the things I hear the pantser, the other end of the spectrum, sort of shout at us, oh, you've got no creativity, you're following it like a slave. Well, no, it's my plan. There's nobody policing it. If I come up with a better idea, I can just change it.
Yeah, there's wiggle room.
Well, that's it. Nobody's ever going to see it.
No.
Nobody's ever going to know what was in the original plan. Just as when you write your first draft and then you start editing it, things change.
Oh, yeah.
Possibly whole new story ideas get added or taken out because of other things that have happened or you've come up with. And this thing that I hear so many of them saying, you know, they don't know what's going to happen and the characters refuse to behave and they can't do this and they can't force them to do that. They're just coming up with ideas on the fly. And that still happens for people that plan ahead.
Yes, yeah.
So then when you come up with a better idea, you adapt. If you come up with a new idea that turns out not to be better, then you drop it. It's one of those strange arguments that happens online constantly without any reason or benefit. Nobody's going to change because of something they see on Facebook. They're not going to adopt a new method and they're not going to change their opinion, but it's constantly debated over and over again. But yes, I do plan exhaustively. If you saw my plan, you'd probably raise your eyebrows at the level of detail that's in there. But I have a scene-by-scene plan for each chapter.
Yeah.
And then I have a section with character bios, descriptions, and then I have lists of things like ship names, classes, and then I've got a separate document which has all the background in it, and that gets added to as I come up with things or I need to think about something. And I've specified all the ships and weapons that they have and what they can do and what they can't do, so that you don't end up with the issue that you used to get in Star Trek where they've got some problem and then they come up with some wonderful solution with their ship's technology and then never use it again. And it's never mentioned again. It's like, well, hang on, you can do that. And if you look at some of the things they can do and then just never do it, you think, well, that episode would have taken 5 minutes. If you just remembered what happened last week, you could have done this.
Use the technology again.
Yeah. Doctor Who kind of does it as well, but they get away with it because the timeline is so fluid. You know, if something has changed between episodes, well, it's time travel. It's just wacky alien stuff going on, so we don't worry about it. Star Trek is more grounded. And it's supposed to be more consistent, but they then do this over and over and over. We've got this new technology we've made to solve this one problem, but then we'll just throw it in the bin. And forget about it. It doesn't work. Yeah, so I do try to avoid that kind of thing. So the other thing is when I'm writing an action scene, I don't want to be scratching my head and going, what caliber are these guns again? How far can they fire? How many missile tubes has it got? I can't remember. I'll just make it up. And then some reader will go, yeah, but you said it's got 6 tubes in the last book. Now it's got 25. What the hell are you doing?
Yeah, I'm sure that is like a writer's thing. Remembering I think for a lot of writers, remembering the eye colour of various characters or things like that. You can't, if you've written it down somewhere,
it's much easier to remember. I'm sure I've got that wrong a couple of times. So I've described a character and then described them again later and they look different. But nobody's written to me and gone, oi, what have you done? So either I didn't or they didn't notice, which still ends up in the same place, doesn't it? You got away with it. But I have caught myself doing it actually and gone, hang on, no. And look back at the description and go, no, that person's not blonde, they've got brown hair. Change it. Get it right. But things like that is what breaks the immersion. As
Hmm.
silly as
Yeah.
it is,
It's
your
jarring,
main
isn't it?
character. It is. Your main character's got brown hair, and then suddenly you're saying he's got black hair.
Hmm.
What, has he run out to the shop and got a box of Just for
Good
Men?
time.
Yeah, what's going on here? What are you doing? Have you forgotten? But and it's infamous at fan conventions and things where they do it on The Simpsons and things. Some spotty teenagers pointing at them, going, "Oh, in this episode, in this scene, he does this, and then in that episode, he does that," and it's completely inconsistent. And the actors sort of roll their eyes at them and go, "Shut up, go away." But the way my mind works, I'm a lot closer to the spotty teenager than to the actor hand waving it away. Consistency matters, and the so-called canon matters.
Hmm.
And the best argument I ever heard for why that is that if the canon doesn't matter, then there's no agreed narrative. And if there's no agreed narrative, then nothing that you write matters because it'll just change.
Yeah.
What does it matter if Voyager is 70,000 light years from Earth? Because in the next episode it could be at home. Because there's no canon to say, well, it can't just do that. So why does this story matter? Why should I care? And ultimately, why should I watch it? And therefore, you get paid. So, you have to create stakes and conflict and threat in the story for the characters to have something to work for and to overcome and to grow, and ultimately for you to comment on the human condition, which is, of course, why we're all here. If none of that matters, if none of that's going to carry over to the next chapter or the next book, why should I read it? Because you don't care. Why should I care?
Mhm.
So, consistency and attention to detail matters. And if you get things wrong by mistake, well, we're only human. If you
Yeah.
get it wrong because you don't care, then you're in the wrong job.
Yeah. Yeah. And readers do notice it. People will notice.
They do. And if it's something they care about, it bothers them.
Hmm.
If they love in the book and they're turning every page, I can't put this down, this is wicked, and then, oh, you've pushed me out of the story because this has happened, and you don't understand what you're talking about as a writer, and it's now made me not want to finish it.
Yeah,
And
you've
we
lost
don't
the
want to
read.
go, yeah, exactly, and we don't want to go onto Amazon or Goodreads and see 1-star DNF. Writer doesn't care about what he's doing. Why should I? Book's gone
Yeah.
in the bin.
Yeah.
Or worse still, they've returned it.
Yes. Yeah. Or even I think on Amazon now that people can post that there's errors in books and things like that. They can
Mm,
alert Amazon of things, and that's then detrimental to
yeah.
your book on Amazon.
Yes, that's a terrifying development, isn't it, with the
Yes.
way Amazon actually works. Although the less said about that, the better, I think, for everyone.
So the next thing I was going to ask is obviously fantasy and sci-fi are sort of your main interests. Would you branch into other genres? Have you thought about trying anything else?
I've toyed with the idea of some mainstream thrillers.
Hmm.
I've got an idea in my head that I want to write a revenge story,
Okay, yeah.
and it's that very writerly urge to write a 150,000 word novel just so I can use a particular quote on the title page. And of course, for me, it's the famous Chinese proverb, when embarking on a path of revenge, first dig two graves. And so now I want to construct an entire book just so I can do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that not the most typical writerly thing imaginable?
Yeah,
Yes,
I've got
it
one
is, I
idea I want to
think.
use, so I need to make a whole thing.
It's got to happen. How often
Yeah.
have we gone on to Threads or Insta or one of the others and seen somebody saying, "Oh, I just came up with this scene in my head while I was in the shower. Now I've got
Yeah.
to write an entire book. Oh goodness, what am I doing?"
Hmm.
It's happening. It's happening
Yeah.
to all of us. So that is in my head, and if I did that, it would probably be quite inspired by the Michael Caine film Harry Brown,
Okay,
which
yeah,
is, of
similar.
course, a very violent revenge
Mhm.
story. Um, and similar stuff that I've read, the Chris Ryan type military crime action
Mhm.
stuff. I think I could probably do quite well at that. And quite handily, an old school friend is a quite senior police officer. So I
Okay.
could have a way in to
Check.
get some procedural and that sort of stuff looked at. And of course, a work colleague is an ex-Royal Marine, so
Hmm.
I've got angles there. I've toyed with the idea of doing horror,
Yeah.
possibly just to give an outlet to some of the images that go through my head, which if people could see, they would be terrified and I would probably be in an asylum, which of course is a classic setting for a horror story. So
Hmm.
that would probably play into my hands. How I would approach that, I've got a few ideas. Maybe supernatural, maybe just sort of really extreme crime stuff. But yeah, would I do it? I don't know. I have thought about military thrillers without the sort of crime angle.
Hmm.
So sort of the Tom Clancy type sort
Yeah.
of thing. There's one of the big novel series that I read as a teen was my dad's Tom Clancy books. If you've read any of them, they're incredibly slow, but when they get going, they don't pull any punches.
Yeah.
They destroy a lot of stuff and they shoot a lot of people. One of them is literally World War Three, so it's
Okay.
pretty intense stuff going on. An Air Force character gets a medal for bayoneting Russian Spetsnaz guys in the face.
Lovely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, gruesome stuff.
Yeah.
That's Iceland for you. It's hard up there.
Yes.
Um, what else have I toyed? I mean, I've toyed with a lot of ideas, to be honest. All
Hmm.
sorts of things go through my head. The trouble is, I've got so little time to actually work.
Yeah.
I then have to focus. And again, I see a lot of people in the writing spaces saying, oh, well, I'm working on 4 different books at a time. I
Yeah.
just scratch my head and go, well, how do you get anything finished? And of course, half of them never do, which
Yeah.
is sort of what they're posting about. But I mean, like I said, a range of ideas that I could have picked to start, and I had to pick one and work on it. Otherwise, I'd never get anywhere because I'd
Hmm.
have
Yeah.
10
Yeah.
documents open. I've got a few other sci-fi ideas, sort of other space operas, some more sort of space fantasy with aliens and stargates and that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Some more realistic ones, quite inspired by things like The Expanse, which is, of course, quite grounded in real physics. Ideas are 10 a penny,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
I think every writer can agree with that. It's the time to
Hmm.
develop it and do the work. Even if you do all the world building, you've then got to do a story.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a lot of my thinking is the world building. What a great setting this would be.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, now what do I do with it?
Yeah. What's happening in that setting?
Yeah, now I've got to tell a story to bring it to life and do something with it. And I don't always have those ideas sort of as easily as the setting. Maybe I should have been a game writer or something like that, but that's a hard market to get into.
Yes.
Although less so these days with indie publishing, you can just
Hmm.
write an RPG and put it out there and people will play it.
Yeah. Yeah. True. And I think a lot of authors, don't they? It's always good to have ideas in the bank because you never know when it might suddenly develop into more, or you might, like you say, be in the shower and you get sort of the story that comes to life. I mean, I know I've got lots of notes on my phone where if I think of something or see something, I just jot it down because then you never know how it might tie in with
Mm.
something else or become something more.
Yeah. And then you look at it later and it says, what if plastic bananas?
Yes, you think,
Okay, what was
what?
I going to do with that?
Yeah,
That's a 2 a.m. thought. Yeah, it's
yeah.
not much
But it
good.
seemed
Delete.
relatively like good at the time.
Yeah,
So.
it seemed like dynamite back then, but nah, not going
Yeah,
to do that. Yeah, but
yeah.
this is where it comes from. You know, you watch a film, you read somebody else's work, and you think, well, what if
Hmm.
I did? And then you go off on all these wonderful fantasies, but the actual work is much harder,
Hmm.
more time consuming, which I think is
Yes.
part of the problem with things like generative AI.
Oh,
People
yeah.
think if they just come up with an idea, that's all it needs,
Hmm.
but it ain't.
Nope.
And if you just plug it into a machine and it regurgitates some semblance of a story, well, that's good enough. I'm an author now. And that isn't how it works.
No, not at all.
Not sure if you wanted to go in that direction, but it's a big concern for a lot of us in the
It is, and
industry
it's
at the moment.
becoming more of a thing, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, for me personally, why would you bother? Because it takes away the joy of the process. That's the whole reason we
Well,
write, I
that's it.
feel, is because it's a pleasure to us as authors.
Yeah.
And if you're using AI, then what's the point, really?
Yeah. You haven't written anything. You've just told a machine to do it. And even if
Mhm.
the LLMs were actually capable of doing it, you haven't done it.
No.
You know, you're not a chef if you ring a takeaway and order something. Somebody else
No.
has done it for you. It's convenient. You've got the end result. But for the artist, it's the process
Yeah.
of getting
Oh, yeah.
there. As you say, it's a pleasure to us. It's an outlet to us. It's something we're compelled to do in a lot of cases, rather than that we want to. I've heard a
Yes.
lot of authors sort of say, you know, the idea holds you hostage until you do it and get it out
Yeah.
onto the page, and then you're free again.
Hmm.
I can relate to that obsession a little bit. It's not as bad as that for me, but I can imagine that. But yeah, the people that think, well, if I just type in a prompt and I'll get a story and I'll sell it and I'll make loads of money, you know, the thinking's completely wrong. I mean, none of us are making loads of money. We know that. We can't all be Stephen King, unfortunately. And of course, this is the other thing I avoid commenting on in writer spaces as much as possible because I don't want to annoy people. But, you know, the conditions that created Stephen King don't exist today. That was the early 70s. It was a different world. You
Oh,
know, it
yeah.
might as well be the Roman Empire. That world doesn't exist anymore.
Hmm.
And the same for everybody's favourite J.K. Rowling. The conditions that created her and Harry Potter don't exist today. And even if you wrote something of the same calibre and got it published with a traditional deal and got it well marketed, you wouldn't become a billionaire. It will literally never happen for another person ever. She is a unicorn. But you go on to Threads, Twitter, wherever. Oh, J.K. Rowling, she was rejected 12 times. Yeah, that's not even one round of queries. Yeah, yeah. Well, you see it, don't you? Time after time, they're commenting, you know, I've sent out 200-300 queries and everybody's ghosted me or
Yeah.
rejected.
And
You
yeah,
know,
it does
12
seem
rejections and then you
it's
got
nothing.
accepted. You would take that. You'd take that with a big grin on your face. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
I'll have
yeah.
that deal. Happy days.
Yeah. And it
And
does
I'll have a
seem like at
tenth
the
of her money.
moment,
Of course, nowadays there's independent publishing, which
yes.
allows you to be seen. But then that's a double-edged sword because millions of books are published every year,
Hmm.
and millions of them are like yours. So how do you stand out? You know, if you take the example of J.K. Rowling, at the time that Harry Potter came out, there are a lot of very similar little kids at a wizard school stories being published. Many of them as good, many of them better,
Hmm.
many of them worse. But they were all there. You know, I distinctly remember walking through the bookshelves at Asda and seeing Twilight and then loads of similar books all around it. And that was trendy at the time. There was
Yeah.
masses of it. But if you want to write a soppy vampire romance, there are trillions of them. So how is yours going to stand out? How do you get
Yeah.
seen? You know, whether you've been traditionally published or not, because they're not going to do a lot of marketing for you, as we've seen personally, and as we've seen with many of our colleagues. So you're doing it yourself and you're
Yeah.
trying to get noticed. You know, my stuff is, as I've said, very classic space opera. There's a lot of other stuff out there that's
Hmm.
quite similar. How do I stand out from those people? How do I get them to put down The Expanse or The Universe and pick up mine? If I figure it out, I'll let you know.
Yes, marketing is one of those big things, isn't it? And promoting yourself that I think
Yeah.
a lot of authors do find difficult. And you touched on it briefly there in that when you are, I think my when I was with a small press, my thought was, okay, like it's going to be more they're doing stuff and I'm doing stuff. But like you sort of said, it is a lot of it is on the author. And I think even with bigger publishers, I've spoken to some other authors who are with some of the big five, and they are still expected to do a lot of the marketing and a lot
Yeah.
of the pushing and organizing. And I think as the sort of authors who don't realize that, you think, oh, it's just going to be, I'll write this book and it'll get picked up and that'll be it. My life will
Yeah.
change. But actually, it's still a lot is on us as authors to do all that sort of stuff. So do you find marketing
Yeah.
yourself
I
easy?
do.
Do you have techniques, things you do?
I find it quite difficult and quite frustrating, and I've seen a lot of people commenting that sort of thing. I think the one that I saw that stuck in my head was, I can't remember who it was said it or where, but it was one of the indies, and they said, I wanted to be a writer, not a marketer. If I wanted to be a marketer, I'd have gone to university for marketing,
Yeah.
and I would work as a marketing agency. And I didn't want to do that. I've been forced by circumstances in the past to work in sales, and I hated it. I despise it. And the people that do well in a sales environment are very morally questionable characters. And the things they do, the way they operate, while legal and within regulatory frameworks, are very morally questionable. And I've seen that firsthand at a few companies that I've worked for. I've picked up a few tips along the way, but a lot of what I saw was quite unethical and I wouldn't want to do it.
Yeah.
So I do find marketing very difficult, especially where there isn't money to pay for marketing. Being published by a small press myself, the money just isn't there. The company doesn't have the funds to pay for a lot of marketing, and that's understandable. I don't have the funds to pay for a lot of marketing, so it's free options, and I'm constantly scratching around for ways that I can get any kind of publicity. Social media is a massive boon to that, but it is also a sea of similar posts and comments and promotion, much of which is of very questionable quality, and in the last couple of years it's inundated with AI slop. And I see writers that I otherwise respect using AI as a promotional tool, and it's very tempting to block and delete those people because I don't condone it. I wouldn't use it myself. And the temptation is there to just get a promotional image for free.
Yes, yeah.
But it isn't free. The cost of doing
No.
that is unacceptable. So I don't do it. I have some images that the publishers provided. I've got a video that a colleague made for me a few years ago, which I occasionally repost, and that was done in Canva, I think, for free. So that's on my list to look at and learn how to use one of these days. But I understand it's now riddled with AI features that you can't disable.
Yeah, you have to be picky and choosy. I think when I use Canva, I always double check the description with the image and the accreditation with the image.
Yeah, where has this come from? Has the artist been credited? Have they been compensated? Is it safe to use this? Because the last thing I want is to put out some kind of promotion and then get told, hey, you're doing AI.
Yes.
And
Well, I
you've
had
argued.
that exact experience. I made a cover for my latest book and then realised that the background image, this is before I was checking Canva properly, realised the background image was an AI image. So I had to take everything down, redo it all. But I was so embarrassed that I hadn't noticed. And you think, oh, I'd notice if it was. And I just missed it.
Which is easy enough to do.
Yeah, but I had to take everything down that I'd already started posting and change because I don't want to use it. But now I have a lovely cover that a lovely artist has made for me. So that's
and that's the thing. As an indie, you do everything yourself, or you pay for everything yourself. For me, it's slightly different because I'm with a small press, so I'm not independently published.
Yeah.
But functionally, I am because they can't do a lot of promotion for me, but they did provide editing, which would have
Yeah.
cost me nearly £1,000 from one
Yeah.
quote that I got for that word count, which of course is typical for my genre. It's not, I'm just writing crazy big books. That's normal. You know, if you
Yeah.
pick up, like I said, one of the David Webber Oniverse stories, they're like that. They're like
Yeah.
monsters. So paying an editor a decent rate for that person to be able to eat and pay for their mortgage and send their kids to school is a lot of money.
Yes. Yeah.
And I don't have it. So for me, getting traditionally published was pretty much imperative. So, you know, I didn't have to pay for cover art. I didn't have to pay for formatting or typesetting. I didn't have to pay for editing and proofreading and all of those other costs that I'm sure are many and varied and heinous. I didn't have to buy ISBNs, you know, all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So, you know, I can't say a bad word about them. They've done okay by me. I'd have liked more promotion, but I get it. They don't have the money. And as a small company, they don't have the reach to get on Waterstone shelves or in Tesco or in the works, although in the works they'd sell it for £2 or something. I'd make no profit.
3 for £6.
Yeah, how they're doing that, who knows? But yeah, I can't complain about that, or not in a reasonable way anyway. I complain all the time, but I haven't had to do those things myself. I haven't had to pay for those things myself, which would have been ruinous. And the other thing is, if I'd been self-published, I would have had to cut corners, and so the quality would have suffered.
Yeah.
And if you'd seen the draft that went to the publisher to be edited, you would see I needed that editor badly. I've learnt a lot from that process, but I still can't skip having an editor because you will do things in your text that an editor will pick and point out and change. I did have a number of sort of comments from the editor that I had to push back and say, well, no, actually, that's correct. A lot of it was the military jargon and technical terms. They didn't know them, and I did. So they questioned a lot of things. Is this right? Why are they repeating this over and over? Because that's how it works. Oh, okay. And that was fine. You know, that was a back and forth process. But if I'd been paying that person, I couldn't have afforded it. So there'd be things in that book that shouldn't be there. So I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful that I didn't have to go through hundreds and hundreds of queries. It was actually the first publisher that I queried. I didn't have any rejections at all.
Okay.
So
That's great.
I gather that's quite unusual. Now, if it was a big 5 publisher and they'd just gone, yes, we'll take that straight away, then yeah, I'd have a big head for sure. But that doesn't happen, of course. You have to get through a lot of gatekeepers before you get there. But yeah, the marketing thing, it's a slog.
Yeah.
It's just getting it in front of people. I've got a product that there's a big category of people are interested in. One of my big hobbies and passions outside of writing is wargaming. And the people that are into wargaming are also into that kind of book.
Yeah.
So it's getting it in front of them in places where it's allowed to do that. You know, because if I go into a Warhammer group and go, hey, can I promote my book? Is it a Warhammer book? No, it ain't. Get out, is what I get. Yeah, you know, it's not allowed. And a lot of the Facebook groups that are for sci-fi fans don't allow you to promote your own work. And the reasons for that are generally sound.
Yeah.
But it's very frustrating for me because I want to do that. And the people in the group are going to be interested, but you're not allowed to do it.
Yeah.
So it gets harder. And then the actual promotional groups are just full of AI scammers and rubbish. A couple of those groups I've managed to get in with the admins and get made into moderators. And so I've eliminated the scammers with brutal efficiency.
Yeah.
But it's a
A
constant
lot of
battle to
work.
keep them out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And you see it constantly. You know, the $50 promo scammers. Oh, yeah, pay me $50 and it'll be in front of 20,000 readers. And you look at their group and it's all just bots. Like,
Yes. Yeah.
you are literally a con man. Go away. But they're everywhere.
Yeah. Oh,
It
yeah.
didn't take me long from being published to find that those people were scammers. Luckily, I never sent any money,
No.
but
But people
lots of
must
people
do.
do.
If
Yeah.
they keep going, people must be falling for it, sadly.
Well,
It's
this is
preying on
it.
people's dreams, isn't it? And their hopes, and that's the almost worse than
This is
anything.
why I despise them almost as much as romance scammers, because you're
Yes.
literally preying on people's dreams, exactly as you say.
Yeah.
You know, I've written this book, I've edited it, I've polished it, I've got it ready, I've published it, and now I want people to read it. Oh, pay you $50 and I'll get thousands of readers. Brilliant, here's $50. Oh, you're a scammer.
Yeah.
And the come down from that is worse than the money,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
$50 isn't a lot. Was it £45? It's
Yeah.
not a fortune. All right, it's a week's shopping, but it's not the end of the world. Maybe not a week's shopping if you've got a family, but you know.
Yeah.
But it's that emotional impact,
Mm-hmm.
and I see it time after time in the writing spaces, for Facebook, Threads, wherever. People constantly saying, "I've been contacted by these people. I've been contacted by these fake accounts that are pretending to be James Patterson
Yeah.
or Stephen King or whoever." I've seen some that have literally pretended to be a dead person. It's like you didn't even bother to check that that person's alive. You just made a fake profile. But the thing is, they don't know, because they're not from our world. They're from other places, from other cultures. They don't have that connection. So they're quite easy to see and see through. But some people will fall for it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't keep doing it, as you
No.
say. The scam typology wouldn't exist if it didn't work at least occasionally. So people have got to be wary. There's so much of it now. Fortunately, on Instagram, they're quite good at deleting them if you report these scammers. And the ones that annoy me are when they contact you and you look at their profile and they've got 40,000 followers and all they post is these book promos. And you think, okay, maybe this is legit, and then they want money. You know, okay, so you're a scammer.
Yeah.
And then you get them deleted, but they're going to come back, aren't they? That's
Yeah.
how they operate.
A new profile.
Yeah, new profile, new stolen picture, and repost the same stuff they've already done and get all the same bots and like farms and so on to produce all their followers. They must make enough money to make it worthwhile.
Yeah. They must do, sadly. But,
Well,
yeah.
there are snakes in the grass, unfortunately, and you've got to watch where you step.
Indeed. So, sort of coming to the end of our conversation, where can we buy your books? And do you have sort of a website or a sort of newsletter or anything that followers can sign up for?
I have got a website. There is a blog on there, although I don't write anything in it. I should be doing that, but I don't know what to say, so I never do.
It's a hard
My
one.
website is davidclegg.uk. It is not .co.uk. It's just .uk. And that's got a link to the books on Amazon.
Okay.
They're also available on Waterstone's online store. They're also available on Smashwords, and there's another platform I can never remember that we went on when we came off Kindle Unlimited, so we didn't have to be exclusive anymore.
Yeah.
For the life of me, I can't remember what this other one's called, but it is there.
Yeah.
I'm desperately trying constantly to get into bookshops. I'm not aware of any shops other than a couple of little places down south that have got copies on the shelf. And those are places that the publisher has got a relationship with and has got their books in.
Yeah.
I'm not sure of any other shops that are stocking them, although any bookshop that is watching this, they're on wholesale. You can get them on Nielsen's and Gardner's. So you can just stock them. You don't need to ask me. Just do it. I don't mind. But getting in to bookshops is a challenge, as I'm sure you can agree. Bookshops, of course, have to be picky what they stock. And
Yeah.
they have to stock what's going to sell and not be left with things like any other business. Books don't go off, unlike, food or that kind of thing. But if you're stuck with a load of books you can't sell, your business is going to go under. So I get it, but I am trying constantly to get in. But the main place to buy would be Amazon or Smashwords if you just want the ebook.
Yeah.
You can get it from there straight away, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, bank holidays, high days, holidays, etc. No waiting, which is, of course, the great thing with ebooks.
Yes, it's instant, isn't it?
Yes, I don't do a newsletter. I occasionally contemplate doing it, but again, I don't know what to say. So I haven't done that at this point. You can follow me on all the social media platforms. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Threads, I'm on Instagram. I am on Blue Sky, although I very rarely go on there. Of late, I should open it up and see the thousands of notifications and then wade through them.
Yeah.
I was a bit turned off by that when they forced you to prove your age to access direct messaging. That seemed very strange. So I don't think I've got direct messaging on there anymore. The main one that I go on now is Threads, to be honest, because it's like Twitter without all the rubbish that's taken over Twitter.
Yeah.
Although there is rubbish taken over on there as well. I suppose that's inevitable with social media.
Yeah. True. But no, it's been really great to chat to you, though, David, and hear all about your world building and your books and your process. That's been really great. So yeah, thank you very much for joining me. And
A
yeah, when
pleasure.
your next book's out, we'll have to have a chat and catch up and find out about the next one.
Yes, indeed. I will let you know when that's happening. I'm still writing the first draft at the moment, and I'm only on to the second chapter. So there's quite a lot to go. I think I'm on 17,000 words, I think.
Yeah.
So that's sort of a tenth of what it's going to be. So I've got a long way to go, and like I said, I don't get a lot of time to work on it. I work full time, and I've got other hobbies that take from that time as well.
Yeah.
So it is tricky. But I'll certainly let you know when the next one comes out, and I'll probably come and please be an ARC reader for me, that kind of thing, or maybe a beta reader or something.
Yeah, sure.
We'll see
Excellent.
when I get to that stage. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I look forward to seeing this go out.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers.